All right. So today I wanted to talk about boundaries. I actually honestly thought I already made a video about this, but I double checked. I have not. I can't believe I haven't done this yet. So, yeah, today is all about boundaries. And boundaries, honestly, they are everything. Basically, it is the unwritten guidelines of how we choose to live our lives, what we allow in our lives, type thing. So the basic kind of like definition of a boundary, like, and when I talk boundaries, I'm always going to refer to healthy boundaries. I know I've seen a few things online and I've heard a few things where people are kind of misconstruing boundaries and using them to kind of for like selfish, not great reasons. And I would call them unhealthy boundaries of like, instead of just trying to limit exposure to a toxic person, they're going to use boundaries to isolate themselves completely and wall themselves off, as opposed to maybe being in an uncomfortable situation, if that makes sense. And an uncomfortable situation is not a reason to isolate yourself, in my opinion. So, yeah. So, healthy boundaries, this entire video is going to be referring to healthy boundaries. They are based on things like our values, our morals, and essentially, again, what we deem acceptable for us. So, in the coaching world, this is a big thing, especially when it comes to family members. There is a saying where if it's not a problem for them, then it's not a problem. So I'm sure all of us have that one family member where, we think they should eat better, exercise more, eat differently, whatever that might be. We all have our opinions on the right way to live or what's best nutritiously or what's best XYZ. Like we all have our opinions in these fields. And of course, for the most part, how we choose to do things, we choose to do them because we think it's right. And therefore, we love everyone else to do the same thing because we think it's the right choice. That's kind of like basic human logic, right? But for a lot of people, like I'll use like one of my family members. I would love for them to eat better, get the diabetes under control. But at the same time, if it's not a problem for them, if they just are not concerned about it, they're happy with their life as is, then it's not a problem. And therefore, I need to let that go. And it's not my life, right? And you just have to let it go. If it's not a problem for them, it's not a problem, right? So this is where, again, what is acceptable for us in our lives, how we want to be treated, and we have to let go of expectations for other people. We're not putting boundaries on other people. And this is also actually a good example of putting boundaries on ourselves in those situations. Like when there's things we don't approve of or we disagree with, it is that, again, we cannot control other people. We can only control how we respond. So then put that boundary up of this is a good one for a lot of daughters out there when dealing with their mothers. We have this a lot where, for whatever reason, we tend to fight easily with our moms. We tend to disagree easily and have these spats. And I think it's because we know our moms love us no matter what. And so we can't just dump our garbage on them or get angry easily because they'll always love us. They forgive us for everything, right? But having that boundary on yourself of, am I going to choose to respond and cause a fight, or am I going to put a boundary up of like, this is a no-go zone. I'm not discussing this with, this person, like my mom, for example. Let's say it's food issues or whatever. I'm going to put a boundary up of, we're not going to talk about this because I know the disagreement is so strong that we are not going to come to a mutual decision and it's only going to cause argument. So it's not even worth discussing. So that boundary is there to prevent, that argument, that potential emotional upset, conflict, yada, yada. Right. So you kind of have these boundaries of what is acceptable for yourself. And again, is it acceptable to just randomly get in arguments with other people, whether it's family, it's coworkers? Having said that, it's the same thing. If you're that person, maybe a coworker bothers you, says things to you, maybe you're that person that's very happy. Someone else thinks you need to manage your life better. Are you going to allow them to keep coming at you? Or do you say something, you create a boundary, be like, listen, this is an off-limit topic. We can not ever discuss this in a healthy manner. So let's just not discuss it because we are not ever going to come to a consensus. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like defining what's acceptable for us, how we want to live our life, how we want our life to look. And boundaries come in like for everything. I personally, I think of boundaries, healthy boundaries, for pretty much everything in life. Managing your time, managing your emotions, physical boundaries, money boundaries, mental wellness, social boundaries. Again, how many times going out, friends, family, how do people treat you? Personal boundaries. So even like self-care, eating habits, drinking habits, all of these things for your personal, like, is it, maybe a boundary that I don't go 5 days without showering? That's probably unacceptable, like just kind of, they're like unwritten rules, unwritten guidelines we have for our life. And definitely 100%, I think everyone needs boundaries. Work. So whether that's your business, your employee, employer, whatever it is, boundaries are so necessary here. Otherwise, it can just get taken way out of control. And this is especially, I know if you're that, I'll just call it the doormat person, or I'm sure we all have at least one of those people in our lives where we're just like, oh, like you need to, stand up for yourself, i.e. you need to put better boundaries in place. And again, though, if they don't think they do, you just got to drop it. But it is if this is you and you're tired of people treating you a certain way, you're tired of doing these things, that means you need boundaries. So I'll just go through a quick general list of signs that you probably need to create a healthy boundary. When you feel like really resentful towards people, when they ask you for help or they're asking for anything, you're feeling overwhelmed, burnt out. So again, that's probably more a work area, could be social as well. Definitely time if you're feeling overwhelmed. You always put yourself last. I know this is a big thing, and a lot of moms tend to do this. Oh, I don't count. My kids come first. My family comes first. Except it comes to the point where literally everything in your life ends up coming first, to the point where you are literally last. That's just not acceptable. Again, this is my opinion. If you're quite happy being that person, then you have no problems and it's not a problem. But obviously, for 99% of people, they wish, you wish you had time for you. You wish you had time to relax. You wish, these are all signs that you're actually not okay with it, even if you might be trying to pretend you're okay with it or trying to make yourself okay with it. Wishing your life was different, wishing you had things you don't, is generally a sign that you would like some sort of change, right? Oh, this is a good one too. Avoiding people so that they can't ask for something. That is a huge sign you need some boundaries. If you're daydreaming, you're running away from things, again, you're avoiding things, you're feeling physical, emotionally drained, there's just no happiness left. And again, kind of similar to where you come last, you're the only one giving. I'm sure all of us have had at one point or another that one-way friendship, where hopefully we've learned how friendships are not supposed to be. I know I had that in high school. All of a sudden you realize you're the only one giving to that other person. And anytime you ask for anything, however small, it's always a no. And all of a sudden you kind of click in like, I don't think this is right. Like, so again, it's just having boundaries in place. So generally speaking, how I like to, it's really tough trying to explain how to create boundaries when there's so many different areas that you can have healthy boundaries in. So a good situation one of the good ways to do this is especially when you're dealing with people. If there are certain situations, so you want to take a situation, how did it look? Something that you're upset. Like I'm sure we've all seen this on movies and in TV, and maybe you've done it yourself, where it's like, ooh, I wish I would have said this to that person, or next time I'm going to do this, or like we have all these afterthoughts because we're unhappy with how that situation went. And if it's something again like a coworker, maybe this person's kind of a bit of the bully at school, at work, whatever it might be, and you really just want to stand up for yourself a little more, or maybe you have that coworker that's always getting you to do half of their job for whatever reason, and you're just really tired of it. You need to write this out because you don't want to just try and wing standing up for yourself or changing a situation in that moment, because usually what happens is emotions tend to take over, and then all of a sudden we're reacting instead of responding, and that can get us in a little bit of trouble, especially when it's dealing with work. That can be tough to smooth over, and friendships are also a really, really tough one, because then we say things that we can't take back, yada, yada. So you want to think of situation. Maybe it's a recurring situation. Like I said, the coworker is taking advantage of you. Maybe someone keeps stealing your lunch. I've heard that word a lot, actually. It's pretty funny. You write that situation out. And we do this in a lot of situations for a lot of, not just boundaries, but like limiting beliefs, a lot of different areas. We always want to write the story out, the situation, so that we can kind of like take that step back and read it as if it wasn't literally our event, our life that it happened to. So we kind of almost take a more subjective stance to it, right? So you want to write out that situation, and then you want to write out the response that you would like to have. And the reason, here's why we want to write it out first, because sometimes you're going to have, in that heat of the moment of being really irritated of that situation, my response, I'm going to punch him in the face. Well, no, that's not the appropriate response. So then we can, okay, how else can we deal with this? Okay, how else? And you might have to write out your responses till you come up with the more appropriate adult response that will actually land you somewhere good and not with an assault charge. Right? So this is where writing it out, pre-thinking it, playing that scene in your head. How would I like this situation to go? Okay, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say, listen, blah, blah, blah. And literally write out. Don't just be like, I'm going to tell them no. Write out, I'm going to say, listen, no, I'm not doing your work anymore. I have more than enough of my own. It's just too much. This is your job. You need to do your job. I'm just not doing this anymore. Write that all out. And then if you're like, oh, well, I know they're going to respond with this, write that out too. Come up with literally that entire response you're going to have, right? And then here's the key is I want you to, after that, write out how this benefits your life, like how your life is different for the better with this boundary in place. I actually will only do my job now. I won't have to do all this extra I'm not paid for. I won't be resenting this person every time I see them. I can just get rid of all of that negative feeling. And this instills kind of also like that little bit of courage for when you go and you need to actually enforce this boundary. You need to remember, yes, I'm doing this because this is how my life will be better, right? So it's similar to the, if you've been, let's say the neighbor constantly gets you to, I don't know, take out their garbage all the time for whatever reason, take it to the curb. Oh, I'm so busy. Can you just take my bin with yours? And you did it the first couple of times to be polite. They got kids, they're a mess, whatever, who cares? But then, 8 months later, you're still taking their bin out. And now all of a sudden this is a habit. And now you're becoming resentful. You don't want to see this neighbor. Somehow she always manages to catch you and ask you anyway. This is one of those where it's like it's dragged on for so long that now you don't know how to say no. It's become awkward. And this is why it's really important to write it out, plan that response, and then you want to reread the situation, your response, how it makes your life better. And you want to reread that and play that scene out in your head and really like rewatch that movie, the more you read it and the more you like play it out in your mind, it's like studying for a test. It's like memorizing. You're going to start building almost like a habit of this is how you respond. And then you've played it out so many times in your mind that when it happens, it's a whole lot easier to the point where it's almost natural because you've played it out so many times. It'll just be, yeah, 10 times easier to say, no, I'm sorry, Sandra, I cannot take your bin out. I'm in a rush myself also. I'm so sorry. Maybe next time. And then run back in your house or whatever. Does that make sense? Where it's like it's like if you think about it as like people in plays or on Broadway or something, when you're about to make a performance, you read the script, you memorize the lines, you rehearse so that it looks really natural. That's similar to what we're doing. If you have that problem standing up for yourself, if you have that issues really enforcing boundaries, and even a lot of people have decided the boundary they need, but they've never been able to enforce it, you rehearse it. And that way, when you go, you can, again, it's almost like that muscle memory. It's that habit. You've rehearsed it so much. You're just like, no, sorry, can't do it. Right. So give it a shot. It really does work. And that is just one of the biggest boundaries I think a lot of people need is standing up to those different situations where it ties into expectations and standards also. Just taking that, 30, what do they have a saying around it, like 30 seconds of discomfort to eliminate hours of anger and frustration type thing, right? Where you have that discomfort of saying no, keeping the boundary, instilling that whatever you want it to be, as opposed to having to do it, being resentful, hating everything. Like, can you just bring 4 dozen cookies to school tomorrow? Oh, yeah. And you should have said no. And the boundaries to say no because you don't have time. And then you're up till midnight. You're hating the world. You're hating the class. You're hating that lady. You're hating the cookies. You almost hate your kids for having to make the stupid cookies for the stupid school. Like, right? It's just this snowball effect of negativity. Whereas if you just took that 10 seconds and you're like, no, I can't. And just like, whether you come up with the excuse, whatever follows that, but like, I'm really sorry, I can't. I'll buy cookies, I'll donate money, whatever it is, but I'm not making cookies. I do not have time. Right? To just hold your ground and be okay with that and know that is in the best interest of you and your family, right? So again, it's that sitting down and deciding what you want your life to look like. So that goes for, everything in your life. That work-life balance. When do you want to stop work? Like, what is it in your life that you're craving that change? What is a healthy boundary you can instill so you don't have enough you time, you don't have enough relaxation. I know for myself, one of the big things I wanted to do was to be able to have at least 30 minutes before I went to bed where I wasn't working, where I could just sit on the couch and just relax, do nothing with the boyfriend, right? And so that was a boundary I put in place. No working after 7 p.m. And this is one of those where you just have to decide, like, this is for my benefit for X, Y, Z reasons, whatever. There's a reason I'm putting this in place. And then I know a lot of people will, well, but I have to get this done, I have to get that done, but this needs. And these are all just excuses. It's like that little toddler brain keeping us in the drama, the chaos, keeping that survival mode going, that comfort zone of the overwhelm, because that's, if you haven't seen my other videos, that's what happens. The overwhelm, the drama, the chaos becomes the comfort zone. So we actually self-sabotage ourselves to keep us there because that's where we inadvertently now feel safe, because that's how we've learned to live, is with all of that garbage, right? So it's just deciding. Once we just decide, I want my life to look like this, and part of that is this boundary. You just need to make that choice and work around it. That's as simple as that is. It's similar to, to my knowledge, people don't just wake up and be like, I'm too busy to go to work today, I'm just not going to go to work. No, we that's a non-negotiable. You get up, You go to work, you come home, and you do things around the schedule of going to work, similar with kids. No, I just need to I need to make sure my child gets to school, or I need to make dinner. Like, you just make that boundary a priority in your life in order to better your life because you deserve it. And you work everything else around that. And trust me, as someone who's been there, done that, you will get things done. You will work around that boundary. It's just, it seems like we can't, and we come up with silly reasons that in the moment are not silly to keep us in that comfort zone. Right? But once we push past and we make that solid commitment to that boundary, it is really shocking how easily we can work around it, work with it, and actually keep it implemented. And this may be even in terms of like boundaries of food for yourself, or exercise, self-care boundaries. Again, maybe it's like silly things like you're cleaning up your language, so you have to put a boundary on, swearing or whatever it might be. We can use boundaries in any part of our life where we want to make changes for the better, and we just decide, okay, this is going to be the new rule, and I'm gonna instill this in this way. And this is why it's also good, again, to kind of like, okay, I want to stop eating so many cookies. Okay, well, I know I'm gonna need a snack. Okay, what else can I eat in its place that's not a cookie? Or maybe for myself, I don't know if this works for you guys. I was an evening snacker at one point, so I started drinking tea in place of food because I just basically had to put, it was that motion of, feeding my mouth. So I would make like a nice herbal tea, something flavored, and that actually worked as a supplement to actual food in the evenings. And then I would make it a nice green tea, or again, like something healthy. So I actually switched it up to something that's very beneficial, not just something that's less bad. Right? And just find that, okay, I know myself. I know I'm going to need this. What am I going to do in its place? How am I going to make this boundary work? Because there's no point making a boundary if we do not have a plan to enforce it, and then we just fall off the wagon, and then we're back to where we were, right? So yeah, you sit down, you decide what you want your life to look like, how you want it to be. You make your list of things that you need to make changes in, where you want to make changes. And the biggest thing though, guys, one new boundary at a time, one change at a time. It's like starting a new food regime or something. If you empty out the cupboards and you like clear out the fridge and you buy whole new food, you're going to get overwhelmed. It's going to be too much. It's too strange. It's all too much, too new, too fast. And you're going to end up falling off the wagon and going back to the old way because it's just too much at one time. And this is the same. You pick one thing, you work on that for a couple weeks till it feels good. It's second nature. You have no problem reinforcing that boundary, and life is good. Then you look down your list, what's next, and you instill that one, right? And then that way we don't get overwhelmed, and we're going to stick with it. These boundaries are going to be there forever because they're now second nature, because you took the time to, I'll say build the fence, and then you concreted it in there. It's not going anywhere. So I hope this all makes sense, guys. I know it's kind of a bit of a tough one to explain because there's so many different areas we can have boundaries. Topics of conversation. I know I used to run a poker room. I was the house person at the poker room, and I had to make the boundary of like, we didn't talk about politics, we didn't talk about religion. I said we didn't talk about wives. I can never remember what the third one was, but there's 3 things was off limits because it always ended badly. So it's just figuring out what these things are, enforcing them, and life is better, and it works, and it's good. And even though I had a few people grumble, no one ever left the poker room because of my rules. They just accepted it, carried on, and talked about something else. And that's actually kind of a good point to end on. Is you may think people won't accept it. You may think people will rebel, or like in my instance, people will just leave if you're going to put rules on them. No, they won't. They won't. They might grumble, but they will accept them. They'll find something else to talk about. They'll find their little workaround. It is really, we are very resilient creatures. And even though we might grumble and complain, it'll be okay. We work around things just fine. So yeah, have fun, guys. Create those. Really think about, again, what you want your life to look like, your dream life. List out what needs to change, how you're going to change it, and just start implementing it. It really is that simple. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day.